Choosing the right processor, or CPU, should be the first thing you start looking at when you start building a computer. So that's what we're going to begin this video series at. First of all, what is a CPU? The processor is the brain of your computer. It determines what you do and how fast you can do it. Now there are a lot of choices on the market today, however there are really only two real competitors. On the blue team sits Intel, and on the red team we have AMD. Intel consistently scores higher in benchmarks, however they are on average higher in price. AMD, typically not as powerful, has a lower price which might be more appetizing than that of Intel. Now one is not necessarily better than the other. Your budget and what you want to do with your computer will help you decide which processor to pick up. Now I'll know I'll be asked for my opinion, so I'll always buy Intel for my main machines. Now that's just my personal opinion, I'm not here to start a debate on that topic. Anyway, when people start looking at processors, the first thing everyone looks at is clock speed, which is now measured in gigahertz. That is far from the end-all, be-all when picking a processor, however. As a quick example, Intel's Pentium 4 from 2005 ran at 3.8 GHz, making that the fastest running Intel processor to ever be created up until just this June when Intel's Haswell refresh codenamed Devil's Canyon processors were released. Their newest CPU runs at a core clock of 4 GHz. Now, without going into great detail about why clock speeds aren't everything, modern CPUs can do more work during the same work cycle as it would on older CPUs. It splits its workload into small steps to complete the same process. Processors inside the same family, however, and the same architecture, then you can compare the two clock speeds efficiently. For example, processors in the Haswell series like the i5-4670K, the i7-4770K have different clock speeds, but they can be compared directly. The i7 therefore is better than the i5 based on that. Now core count is where things really start to matter. Most processors out there have between 2 and 6 cores, but of course there are those exceptions such as AMD's 8-core CPU. Ideally, programs you are running will spread workload across all your cores to complete the work faster. If video editing or photo editing is something you like to do like me, then quad-core or higher processors are something that is almost a necessity, especially if time is money and you have the patience of a thing with no patience. Now not every program out there supports multi-cores, but generally more cores is a good thing. It should be noted that more cores means you can do more things, i.e. run more programs all at the same time. So clock speed determines how fast you can do things, while core count determines how many things you can do at once, essentially. That's how it kind of breaks down. Now there's also a beautiful thing out there called hyperthreading. This is a feature that mainly only Intel has, however there are some AMD processors that have something similar. Now this takes your single CPU and pushes another set of tasks inside a single cycle. This basically allows you to do more work, not double the speed, but however about 30% improvement. Now without getting too much into this topic, this is a big feature for programs that can handle hyperthreading. Again, not all programs are designed to use this. Video editing, for example, takes great advantage of hyperthreading. It's not all great though. There are some cases when hyperthreading will actually hinder your performance in certain things like gaming. Usually it's a very insignificant amount, but it is worth mentioning. Now you can also turn off hyperthreading using some commands in command prompt. Now to the actual topic at hand. How do you choose your new baby? Price should be the first step on your adventure. Start looking at your options currently on the market. I look at the most recent generation of processors released by both the red and the blue team. And this will take us directly into our second step, which is choosing the brand for you. If you are solely trying to build the most powerful machine you can on a small budget, I'd say about 7 times out of 10 you'll be picking up an AMD chip. If you're looking for the best performance, Intel is your guy. I would almost say that your budget dictates which company you will go with. Without getting into the exact percentages, more often than not, AMD is providing better bang for your buck on the lower end, especially if you're under the $200 range for CPUs. But if you can afford to put more into your CPU part of the budget, then Intel is the no-brainer. As for core count, you can get by with a dual-core CPU, but it needs to be a good one. An example would be Haswell's Intel i3-4130. It is a decent budget CPU that can handle games pretty well. However, games are becoming more and more demanding, so a quad-core processor is highly recommended when you're in the buying process. The quad-core Intel i5 has been a very common go-to for most gamers out there, and I highly suggest you check them out. If you are doing nothing but video editing, 6 and 8 cores might be something you want to pick up. Now you need to look at the applications you are using and see if they will actually be able to benefit from all these extra features such as extra cores and hyperthreading. Most games out there right now are only optimized for 4 cores, so actually having more cores isn't necessarily a better thing in some situations. Now moving on to a topic that really isn't discussed as much, and that is caching. Caching allows the processor to store frequently accessed or soon to be accessed memory, which is typically stored on the RAM, and it can store it right on the actual die of the CPU. It honestly provides the biggest speed up after raw clock speed in terms of program performance. So I will say, essentially when you're stuck between 2 processors, get the one with the biggest L3 cache. Now we're going to look at dedicated graphics. Most processors have onboard video graphics which allow you to see what you're doing on a computer without the need for a dedicated video card. If you are building a computer for low-end gaming or your typical office work, then graphics needs will be low, meaning you will not need a dedicated graphics card, as the graphics provided by your CPU will be enough. That is, if your CPU has dedicated graphics. It may be worth pointing out that both vendors have made a good push towards beefing up their onboard graphics, with them going almost neck and neck at this point. The whole APU line led the charge by AMD, integrating Radeon graphics into their CPU, but I would say that Intel is playing catch up, and they have made major strides in their latest generation, which is Haswell. Now if you're planning on gaming in HD with good textures, you're going to need a dedicated video card. We'll get into that when you're choosing a video card later on in the series. Finally, we're going to talk about overclocking. Overclocking changes your CPU's default core clock and allows you to make it faster. Sounds great, right? Well, if you don't know what you're doing, you can make a critical error and your CPU could be destroyed in seconds. Now, I don't want to scare you away from this, as overclocking is one of the greatest things about owning a computer and being able to be a computer enthusiast. And nowadays, CPUs have a decent amount of protection with thermal shutdown limits and overvolt protection. Now, it's not saying you can crank the V-core up to 11, but as long as you don't push it too high too fast, you can stay pretty safe. Intel does have a protection plan where you could basically get a replacement chip when tuning it. The tuning protection plan provides additional coverage on only certain processors. To quote the fact on Intel's website, "We understand this position, and while we cannot endorse overclocking, we want to provide a limited remedy if issues arise as a result of their decision to enable overclocking." If you are interested in overclocking, make sure the CPU you purchase is unlocked, as only you can overclock with those processors. Unlocking will make your CPU run hotter, meaning you will very likely need a better cooling solution. Most processors come with a stock, cheaper cooler, but some CPUs do not have it and you'll need to buy an aftermarket cooler. These radiators and extra fans help the CPU keep cool and prevents it from overheating. It's worthy to note that AMD processors consistently break and hold the world record for overclocking. Say what you will about everyday performance, when it comes to testing the upper limits, AMD can do some pretty hard work. And for someone with a low budget who wants a little more power, overclocking may offer an excellent solution. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helped you kind of select your CPU, or at least kind of give you an idea of what you need to look for when selecting a CPU.